The champagne glass shattered against the patio stone 3 feet from where I stood. Not thrown at me. No, Calvin was too calculated for that. He'd accidentally knocked it off the table while gesturing wildly, his face red with manufactured outrage, his fingers stabbing the air between us like a weapon. The guests had gone silent. Every eye in that backyard turned toward me, and in that moment, I understood what it meant to be devoured by strangers. You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you, Victor? His voice carried across the fairy lights and white tents, loud enough to make sure no one missed it. Sitting on that estate like some kind of king while your own sister scrapes by? I stood there, frozen. Not because I was afraid. Not because I didn't have words. But because I knew, right then, with everyone watching, that anything I said would be used against me. So I said nothing. And that silence? That's what he wanted most. Have you ever felt your dignity stripped away in front of people you thought respected you? That moment when laughter becomes a knife, and family becomes the cruelest audience of all. That's where I was. Standing in my sister's backyard, wearing my best suit, holding a gift for the woman who'd just let her fiancé publicly gut me. The thing about humiliation is that it doesn't ask permission. It just takes. Calvin took another step closer, emboldened by the crowd's uncomfortable laughter. We're moving forward, old man. Whether you like it or not. Lorna deserves her share, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. My sister stood beside him in that silver dress, beautiful as always, her hand resting on his arm. She didn't meet my eyes. Didn't say a word. Just stared at her champagne flute like it held answers she couldn't find in my face. That's when I knew. This wasn't about fairness. This wasn't about family. This was about money, control, and a man who'd learned that the easiest way to take what you want is to make everyone believe you deserve it.
I could have said something.
Could have told everyone about the phone calls I'd been getting from lawyers, about the casual suggestions Calvin had been making about selling the estate, about how he'd been filling Lorna's head with poison for months. I could have mentioned the private investigators folder sitting in my car right now, stuffed with information that would make every person in this backyard sick. But I didn't. Instead, I set down the gold locket I'd brought for Lorna, our mother's locket, the one she'd admired since childhood, on the gift table. I looked at my sister one last time, waiting for her to say something, anything. She didn't. So I turned and walked through that crowd of strangers wearing expensive clothes and cheap smiles. Behind me, I heard Calvin's voice rise again, playing to his audience. Don't take it personal, Vic. We're still family, right? Family. That word tasted like ash in my mouth. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs, and my mind clearer than it had been in months. Because here's what Calvin didn't know. I wasn't the kind of man who shouted. I wasn't the kind who made scenes or threw punches or fought dirty in public. I was the kind who waited. The kind who documented. The kind who, 3 months ago, had hired an old friend to dig into the background of the man now celebrating his victory over me. And what that friend found. It was enough to end Calvin's world. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the anger had crystallized into something colder. Something surgical. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at my phone, knowing that one call would change everything. One call to a contact in the State Financial Crimes Unit, a man who owed me a favor from years back. I thought about my parents, about the estate they'd built with their own hands, about Lorna, beautiful and broken and blind to the predator she'd invited into our family, about the way Calvin's smile never reached his eyes. Then I made the call. Marcus, I said when he answered. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm cashing it in. Tonight. What do you need, Victor? Justice, I said. And I need it fast. I sent him the files, bank records, marriage certificates, police reports from 2 previous wives, property deeds registered under shell companies, and one very interesting document about a boating accident that was never properly investigated. 27 pages of evidence that Calvin Ross wasn't just a manipulator. He was a professional. Marcus called back within an hour. Victor, this is serious. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Not if it's real. Is it real? Every page. Silence on the other end. Then, we move tomorrow night. Be ready. I hung up and sat in the dark of my study, surrounded by books my father had collected, photos of a family that used to mean something. On my desk sat the folder, evidence of 3 women, 3 fortunes, and one pattern that Calvin thought he'd perfected. He thought I was just an old man clinging to property. He had no idea I'd already started planning his downfall. Would you have walked away, or would you have made him regret it too? Hit like if you've ever had to bite your tongue just to keep your dignity, and stayed tuned because what happened next changed everything. Lorna was 7 when she learned that beauty could get you anything. I was 12, standing in our mother's kitchen, watching my sister bat her eyelashes at Dad after she'd broken his favorite fishing rod. She'd taken it without asking, used it as a prop in some make-believe game, and snapped it clean in half. I would have been grounded for a month. But Lorna? She got a hug and a promise of ice cream. That's when I understood how our family worked. She was the golden child. I was the responsible one. And those roles never changed, not even after our parents died. We grew up in Willow Bend, in a house that sat on 12 acres of land our grandfather had bought in the 50s. Back then, nobody thought that property would be worth anything.
Now?
Developers circled it like vultures, offering numbers that made your head spin. But it wasn't about money to me. It was about memory, about legacy. Our father used to take me out to the old oak tree on the east end of the property. We'd sit there for hours, him teaching me about responsibility, about keeping your word, about how a man's character showed up in what he protected, not what he took. He never had those talks with Lorna. Maybe he knew she wouldn't listen. Maybe he just loved her differently. When they died, Mom from cancer, Dad from a heart that gave out 6 months later, the estate fell to both of us equally. But Lorna was living in California, chasing some acting dream that never panned out. She couldn't manage a checkbook, let alone property taxes and maintenance. So I took it on, paid the bills, fixed the roof, kept the gardens alive. She never said thank you. Not once. Instead, she'd call every few months, usually broke, usually needing money. And I'd send it. Because that's what big brothers do, right? You protect. You provide. Even when it hurts. Then came the men. Always the wrong ones. The charmer who stole her credit cards. The businessman who left her with $50,000 in debt. The musician who convinced her to invest in his sure-thing studio that never recorded a single song. I watched her cycle through them, each one worse than the last, each one teaching her that love meant taking. By the time she was 45, she'd moved back to Willow Bend. Older, harder, but still beautiful enough to make people forgive her mistakes. She rented a small apartment downtown, started working at a boutique, and for a while I thought maybe she'd finally grown up. That's when Calvin showed up. I remember the day she brought him to Sunday dinner at the estate. He wore a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His handshake was firm, practiced. His smile was perfect. Too perfect. Like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. "Victor," he said, looking around the dining room at the antique furniture, the family portraits, the crystal chandelier Mom had loved. "This is incredible. You've really maintained the place." "It's home," I said simply. "Must be worth a fortune now, with all the development in the area." There it was. Not even an hour in, and he was already calculating value. I caught Lorna's eye, but she looked away, smiling like he'd just paid me a compliment. Over the next few months, I watched him work. Subtle at first. He'd mention how much easier Lorna's life would be with liquid assets instead of tied-up property. He'd suggest that holding on to the past wasn't healthy. He'd wonder aloud why siblings would share an estate when they could each have their own futures. And Lorna listened. Every word sank in like poison. She started showing up less to family dinners. Stopped returning my calls as quickly. When I'd ask about Calvin, she'd get defensive.
"He's good to me, Vic."
He understands what I need. What she needed was someone who saw her as more than a paycheck. But I couldn't say that without pushing her further away. The engagement announcement came via text message. No call. No conversation. Just, Calvin proposed. "We're getting married in the spring. Thought you should know." I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to be happy for her. The other part, the part that had been watching, documenting, worrying, knew this was the beginning of the end. When I called to congratulate her, Calvin answered her phone. Victor. Great timing.
We were just talking about you.
Were you? Yeah, about the estate. Lorna's been thinking it might be time to discuss a more equitable arrangement. Since you've been managing everything for so long. Wouldn't want anyone to think there's been any impropriety. Impropriety. Like I was stealing from my own sister. We can talk about it after the wedding, I said carefully. Or, we could talk about it now, Calvin pressed. No reason to wait, right? Unless there's something you're not telling us. I heard Lorna's voice in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. I'll see you both at the engagement party, I said and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that conversation, the way Calvin had said impropriety, like he was planting seeds of doubt, like he was setting me up to be the villain in a story he was writing. That's when I made the decision. If Calvin wanted to dig into my management of the estate, I'd dig into him. Fair was fair. I called an old friend the next morning. Tommy Chun, retired private investigator, someone I'd known since college. We kept in touch over the years, and I trusted him more than most people. Tommy, I said, I need you to look into someone for me.
Who?
My sister's fiancé. There was a pause. Victor, you sure about this? No, I admitted. But I need to know who he really is. Give me a name and whatever details you have. I'll see what I can find. I sent him everything, Calvin's full name, date of birth, the company he claimed to own, even his social media profiles. Then I waited. 2 weeks passed with nothing unusual. I started to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being overprotective. Then Tommy called back. Victor, he said, his voice tight. We need to meet. In person. Don't tell anyone about this call. My blood went cold. What did you find? Not over the phone. Tomorrow. Noon. The diner on 5th. When I didn't just lose my sister, I gained an enemy who'd been planning this long before he ever said her name. The diner smelled like coffee and old grease, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into the clatter of dishes. Tommy sat in the back booth, a manila folder on the table, his face grim. I slid in across from him. That bad. He pushed the folder toward me without a word. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. The first photo showed Calvin, younger, different haircut, but unmistakably him, standing next to an older woman in a wedding dress. The caption underneath read, Ross and Patricia Hendricks wed in intimate ceremony. Patricia Hendricks, Tommy said quietly. Married Calvin 8 years ago. She was 62, owned a successful art gallery in Portland. Worth about $3 million.
Was.
Past tense. I flipped to the next page. Bank statements showing wire transfers, property sales, accounts drained systematically over 18 months. Then a death certificate dated 3 years ago. Cause of death. Accidental drowning. Boating accident off the coast. My hands went cold. There's more, Tommy continued. Before Patricia, there was Margaret Chen, no relation to me, different spelling. Widow, 70 years old, owned commercial real estate in Denver. Calvin married her when he was 31. She died 2 years into the marriage. Heart attack, officially. But her children contested the will. Said Calvin had isolated her, controlled her finances, forged documents. Did they prove it? Case was dropped. Margaret's kids didn't have enough money to keep fighting. Calvin walked away with everything. I stared at the documents spread across the table, my stomach turning. So, he marries older women with money, drains them, and they conveniently die? That's the pattern. And Victor? Tommy pulled out another sheet. He's already started on Lorna. Look at this. Joint bank account opened 3 weeks after their engagement. Power of attorney documents signed. Life insurance policy with Calvin as sole beneficiary. He's moving faster this time, Tommy said. Maybe because Lorna's younger, healthier. Maybe because he's getting bolder. Either way, your sister's in danger. I felt sick. Not just angry sick. Because I'd seen the signs and told myself I was being paranoid. Because I'd let her drift away instead of fighting harder to make her see. What about the boating accident? I asked. Patricia. Was there an investigation? Minimal. Calvin reported her missing after a day trip. Coast Guard found her body 3 days later. He claimed she'd been drinking, fell overboard. He tried to save her. No witnesses. Insurance paid out without question. I closed the folder, my mind racing. If I show this to Lorna, she won't believe me. She'll think I'm trying to sabotage her happiness. Probably, Tommy agreed. He's had months to work on her. That's what these guys do. They isolate their targets, make them dependent, convince them that anyone who questions the relationship is the enemy. Then what do I do? Tommy leaned back, studying me. You document everything. You make sure that if something happens to Lorna, there's a trail. And you find someone with legal authority who'll listen. I thought about that for a long time. About Lorna in her silver dress, holding Calvin's arm, refusing to meet my eyes. About our parents and the promises I'd made at their graves to watch out for her. I'll figure something out, I said finally. Tommy nodded. Be careful, Victor. Men like Calvin are dangerous when they're cornered. And if he thinks you're onto him... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That night, I locked the folder in my safe at home and tried to act normal. Lorna called 2 days later about the engagement party details. I listened to her talk about flowers and catering, and I didn't mention Calvin. Didn't mention investigations, or dead wives, or life insurance policies. I just said, I'll be there. Because I needed to see him up close. Needed to look him in the eye now that I knew what he really was. The engagement party arrived too fast. I dressed carefully, brought the gold locket for Lorna, and drove to her house with the folder locked in my trunk. Just in case. Just as insurance. Calvin greeted me at the door with that perfect smile. Victor, glad you made it. Come on, let's get you a drink. He led me through the crowd like we were old friends, his hand on my shoulder, his voice warm. Playing the gracious host. Playing the good guy. But I'd seen the photos. I knew about Patricia and Margaret and the pattern he thought he'd perfected. Dinner started normally enough. Laughter, toasts, strangers celebrating a love story they knew nothing about. I sat at the family table, watching Calvin charm everyone around him. He had that gift, making people feel special, seen, important. That's how predators worked. They studied you, found your weakness, and told you exactly what you needed to hear. Then came his toast. He stood, glass raised, arm around Lorna. Started talking about family, about futures, about moving forward. The words sounded nice. Noble even. Until he turned them into weapons. You know, some families hold on to old properties, old money, old control. But we're moving forward. Isn't that right, Victor? Every head turned toward me. Lorna's smile faltered. Calvin's eyes gleamed with something cruel. Victor's been managing the family estate for years. But soon, we'll make sure everything's fair, truly fair, between siblings. Don't worry, Lorna. You'll finally get what you deserve. The silence felt like drowning. I kept my voice steady. Be careful, Calvin. This isn't the place. But he laughed. Loud. Performance laughter, designed to make me look weak. Oh, come on, old man. It's just a toast. No need to get defensive. Unless there's something you're hiding. The crowd chuckled. Uncomfortable, but they chuckled. That's when I stood up. Didn't say a word. Just pushed my chair back, walked through that backyard full of strangers, and left. Behind me, Calvin's voice carried. Don't take it personal, Vic. We're family, right? I drove home with my hands shaking and my mind clear. He wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. Wanted to paint me as the bad guy so nobody would question him when he started dismantling everything my parents built. He thought I'd shrink away defeated. Time to move on from the past. Old man, his voice echoed in my head. But here's what Calvin didn't understand. The past wasn't something I was clinging to. It was evidence. Documentation. Truth. And men like him, men who thought charm and confidence could erase their crimes, always made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the quiet ones. The gold locket sat on my kitchen counter, still in its velvet box. I'd left it behind at the party, abandoned on the gift table like everything else I'd tried to give my sister over the years. She probably didn't even notice. Too busy standing beside Calvin while he performed his victory lap, accepting congratulations from people who had no idea they were celebrating with a killer. That's what he was. Not officially, not legally, not yet. But I'd seen enough. Patricia drowned. Margaret heart attack. Both deaths convenient. Both deaths profitable. And now Lorna, signing documents, opening accounts, making Calvin the beneficiary of her life. The pattern was clear. He just needed time. I poured myself a whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat in my father's old study. The room still smelled like him somehow, leather and pipe tobacco, even though he'd been gone for 8 years. Photos lined the walls. Our family before everything fell apart, before Lorna learned that being beautiful meant never having to be accountable, before I became the keeper of memories nobody else wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Heard you left early. Everything okay? Guest from tonight. I deleted it. Then another came through, this time from Lorna. You embarrass me. Why can't you just be happy for me? Happy. Like happiness was a switch you flipped, ignoring every warning sign, every red flag, every dead woman in your fiancé's past. I typed back. We need to talk. Alone. Tomorrow. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then nothing. She wasn't going to meet me. Calvin had already made sure of that. Probably told her I was jealous, bitter, unable to let go of control. That's what manipulators did. They rewrote reality until their victims couldn't trust their own instincts. I pulled Tommy's folder from the safe and spread it across the desk. Bank statements, marriage certificates, death reports. Evidence that would hold up in court if I could get the right people to look at it. But that was the problem. Without a crime in progress, without an active threat, what could I prove? That Calvin had a type? That he liked older women with assets? That 2 of his previous wives had died in accidents? Suspicious, yes. Criminal? Maybe. Enough to stop a wedding? Not even close. I needed something current. Something that showed intent. Something that proved he was actively defrauding Lorna, right now, not just planning to. I opened my laptop and started digging. Calvin's business, Ross Consulting Solutions, had a website that looked professional, but said nothing specific. No client testimonials. No case studies. Just generic language about financial optimization and asset management. I ran the business license, filed 3 years ago in Delaware, a state known for loose corporate regulations. Registered agent was a law firm that specialized in shell companies. Red flag. I searched property records. Calvin owned nothing under his own name. Not a house, not a car, nothing. Everything he had was leased or borrowed. He existed on paper, but left no footprints. That's how you lived when you planned to disappear. Then I found something interesting. A lawsuit, filed and quickly settled, from 4 years ago. A woman named Janet Cross claimed Calvin had defrauded her of $200,000 through a fake investment scheme. The case was sealed as part of the settlement, but the docket was public. Janet Cross had been represented by a lawyer in Phoenix. I wrote down the name, the case number, everything I could find. Then I kept searching. By 3 in the morning, I had a list. 5 women besides Patricia and Margaret who'd filed complaints, restraining orders, or civil suits against Calvin over the past decade. None of them had pursued criminal charges. All of them had settled quietly, probably because Calvin threatened them or paid them off or convinced them that going public would destroy their reputations. 5 women. And those were just the ones who'd reported him. I sat back, exhausted and furious. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was a pattern of behavior, documented and repeated. Calvin Ross was a professional predator, and my sister was his next target. The question was, how did I stop him? I couldn't go to Lorna. She wouldn't listen. I couldn't go to the police, no active crime, no jurisdiction, no evidence that would justify an investigation. I could hire a lawyer, maybe try for a restraining order, but Calvin would just spin it as family drama, me trying to control my sister's life. Then I remembered Marcus Webb. We'd gone to college together, back when we both thought we'd change the world. He'd gone into law enforcement. I'd gone into private sector work. We'd stayed in touch over the years, mostly holiday cards and occasional lunches. But Marcus had moved up. Last I heard, he was working financial crimes for the state, investigating fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. The kind of crimes Calvin specialized in. I looked at the clock. 3:30 in the morning. Too early to call, but not too early to prepare. I spent the next 2 hours organizing everything into a single document. Calvin's history, the dead wives, the lawsuits, the shell companies, the suspicious business practices. I included photocopies of every document Tommy had found, bank statements showing the systematic draining of Patricia's and Margaret's accounts, and the life insurance policy Calvin had taken out on Lorna. By dawn, I had a case file that would make any investigator pay attention. I waited until 9 to call Marcus. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Victor? Been a while." "I need a favor," I said. "A big one." There was a pause. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that might save my sister's life." That got his attention. "Talk to me." I explained everything: Calvin, the pattern, the evidence, the urgency. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Send me what you have," he said finally. "All of it. If this guy's running financial fraud, we can build a case. But Victor? This takes time. Investigations, warrants, building evidence that'll hold up in court. We're talking weeks, maybe months." "I don't have months," I said. "They're getting married in 3 weeks. Then we better move fast." By the time I got home, I'd sent Marcus everything. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence that proved Calvin Ross was a fraud and a predator, and a man who left corpses in his wake. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. Not to anyone in particular. I'd stopped believing in interventionist gods after my parents died. But I prayed anyway, to the universe or fate or whatever force might be listening, that justice would come fast enough to matter. That night, alone in my study, surrounded by evidence of a man who thought he was untouchable, I made a decision. He wanted to humiliate me in public. So I decided to destroy him in silence. Tommy called back 3 days later with something that changed everything. "Victor, I found the boat." I was in the middle of reviewing tax documents for the estate, trying to maintain normalcy while Marcus worked his investigation. "What boat?" "The one Patricia Hendricks died on." Calvin reported it sold to a private buyer in Mexico right after her death. Said he couldn't stand to keep it. But I tracked the registration. It never left the country. It's docked in a marina 30 miles from here under a shell company name. He still owns it. My pulse quickened. Why would he lie about that? Because boats are expensive to maintain. If he sold it like he claimed, that money should have shown up somewhere. It didn't. Which means he's hiding assets, probably for the next job. "Victor, this is financial fraud. Clear, documentable fraud." I sat forward, gripping the phone. "How fast can you get photos, registration papers, everything?" "Already done. I'm sending them to you now. Forward them to your guy at the state. This is the smoking gun you need." The files came through within minutes. There it was, the boat registration under Coastal Holdings LLC, a company that traced back to Calvin through 3 layers of paperwork. The same boat he'd reported sold. The same boat Patricia had died on. He'd kept it, like a trophy. I forwarded everything to Marcus with a single message. "This is current. This is provable. How fast can you move?" He called back within an hour. "Victor, this is good. Really good. We've got fraud, we've got asset concealment, and if we can tie this to his previous marriages, we've got a pattern. I'm bringing this to my supervisor today." "How long?" "To get a warrant? Maybe 48 hours if we push." "To make an arrest?" "End of the week if everything checks out." End of the week. The engagement party had been 6 days ago. That meant we were looking at 12, maybe 13 days before they could move on Calvin. Lorna's wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks out. We might actually make it. I spent the next 2 days in a state of controlled anxiety. I avoided Lorna's calls, 3 of them, increasingly angry. I ignored Calvin's text messages, friendly at first then tinged with threat. Hey Victor, we should talk.
Clear the air.
No hard feelings, right?
Right.
No hard feelings about the women you killed. No hard feelings about the sister you're actively defrauding. On the third day, Marcus called. We've got the warrant. Moving tonight. Tonight. The word hit me like electricity. Where? I asked. Your sister's place. She's hosting a small dinner party according to our surveillance. Calvin will be there, surrounded by witnesses. Clean arrest, minimal scene. I want to be there. Victor, that's not. I need to see this. My voice was steady, final. I'll stay in my car. Down the street. You won't even know I'm there. Marcus sighed.
Fine.
But if you interfere, I'll arrest you myself. Understood. That evening, I drove to Lorna's neighborhood and parked 3 houses down, engine off, lights dark. It was 8:15. Through the windows, I could see people moving around, the warm glow of dinner party lighting, the illusion of normalcy. Calvin had no idea what was coming. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd humiliated me, isolated Lorna, and secured his next fortune. He was probably in there right now, charming guests, playing the devoted fiancé, already planning which assets to liquidate first. At 8:30, unmarked cars rolled up the street. No sirens. No lights. Just 3 dark sedans that parked in formation around Lorna's driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. Agents stepped out, Marcus among them, badge visible on his belt. They moved with practiced efficiency, walking up to the front door. One knocked. Firm, official. I couldn't hear what happened next, but I saw it through the window. The door opening. Lorna's confused face. Calvin appearing behind her, smile in place, probably about to turn on the charm. Then Marcus spoke. Even from this distance, I could read the shift in Calvin's body language, the sudden tension, the step backward, the hand that went up in protest. Marcus held up paperwork. Other agents moved inside. This was it. This was the moment. Calvin tried to push past them toward the door. An agent caught his arm. Calvin jerked away, and that's when they moved, professional, quick, decisive. Hands behind his back. Cuffs clicking into place. Through the window, I watched my sister's face transform from confusion to horror. She was screaming now. I could see it even if I couldn't hear it. Guests were backing away, some filming on their phones. Calvin was being let out in handcuffs, his perfect face finally showing what he really was, scared. They walked him past my car. He didn't see me sitting there in the dark. Didn't know that the old man he'd mocked, the brother he'd tried to intimidate, had been the one to destroy him. Marcus caught my eye as they loaded Calvin into the car. He gave me a single nod. Justice didn't always need an audience. Sometimes it was sweeter when it came in silence. I sat there for a long time after they drove away, watching the chaos through Lorna's windows. Guests leaving. Lorna collapsing into a chair. The life she'd built with a monster falling apart in real time.
My phone rang.
Her name on the screen. I answered. You did this. Her voice was raw, broken. You did this, didn't you? From across the street, I watched the man who mocked me beg for mercy. And I didn't feel a thing.
Yes, I said into the phone. I did this. Silence. Then, why? I looked at Lorna's house, at the shadows moving behind the curtains, at the remains of a dinner party that would never be forgotten for all the wrong reasons. Because he was going to kill you. That's insane. Patricia Hendricks, Margaret Chun, 2 wives before you, both dead, both stripped of everything they owned before they died. My voice stayed calm, factual. Calvin's been doing this for years. Lorna, you were just next in line. I heard her breathing change, rapid and shallow. You're lying. I have the files. Police reports, bank records, death certificates. Marcus, the agent who arrested him, has everything. Calvin kept the boat Patricia died on, lied about selling it, used a shell company to hide it. That's fraud. That's what they arrested him for tonight. But there's more. So much more. Stop. Her voice cracked. Just stop. He took out a life insurance policy on you 3 weeks ago. made himself the beneficiary. You know that, did you? The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then, quietly, he said it was standard for engaged couples. It's not. I closed my eyes. Lorna, he isolated you from me on purpose, made you think I was the enemy. That's what men like him do. They cut you off from anyone who might see through them. I need to go. Wait. I said I need to go. The line went dead. I sat in my car for another hour, watching her house. Lights went off one by one. Eventually, I drove home, exhausted and hollow. I'd save her life, but I wasn't sure she'd ever forgive me for it. The next morning, news outlets picked up the story. Local businessman arrested on fraud charges. They didn't mention the dead wives yet. That would come later, when investigators dug deeper. But they mentioned the hidden assets, the shell companies, the pattern of deception. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting comments. Old friends asking if I'd heard. Distant relatives suddenly concerned about Lorna. I ignored all of them. The only call I answered was from Marcus. Victor, we need you to come in. Give an official statement. About what? Your sister. Her relationship with Calvin. Timeline of events. We're building a broader case now. Looking into the previous wives, the deaths, everything. Your information could be crucial. I spent 3 hours at the state office, walking investigators through everything I knew, everything Tommy had found, every suspicion that had proven correct. They recorded it all, took copies of documents I'd gathered, thanked me professionally. But when I left, Marcus walked me to my car. She's not taking this well. I know. Calvin's lawyer already filed for bail. Judge denied it. Flight risk, pattern of behavior, potential danger to witnesses. He's staying locked up through trial. But his people are spinning this as a vindictive brother trying to ruin his sister's happiness. I laughed bitterly. Of course they are. Public opinion doesn't matter. Evidence does. And we have plenty. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it. I nodded, but inside I felt nothing resembling victory. Just exhaustion and the ghost of my sister's voice saying, "You embarrass me." Days passed. The story grew. Media outlets dug into Calvin's past, found the previous marriages, the lawsuits, the pattern. Patricia's family came forward, demanding the case be reopened. Margaret's children hired lawyers. Suddenly, Calvin Ross wasn't just facing fraud charges. He was facing potential murder investigations in multiple states. And through it all, Lorna didn't call, didn't text, disappeared into silence. I tried reaching out twice. Both times it went straight to voicemail. The second time, I left a message. I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. I'm here. She never responded. 2 weeks after the arrest, I was working in the state garden. Something I did when my mind wouldn't settle. When I heard a car pull up, I looked up, dirt on my hands, and there she was. Lorna stood at the edge of the garden, thinner than I remembered, her face hollow. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her clothes looked slept in. She looked, for the first time in her life, ordinary. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stood, brushed off my hands. Of course. We walked to the porch in silence. I made coffee neither of us drank. We sat in the chairs our father had built 30 years ago, overlooking the property he loved. And for a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, they froze all his accounts. The apartment was in his name. Some lease arrangement I didn't understand. I can't stay there. You can stay here. She shook her head. I can't take charity from you. Not after. It's not charity. It's family. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what family means anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold locket. The one I'd left at the engagement party. The one someone had mailed back to me with no note. I held it out to her. Mom wanted you to have this, I said. Lorna stared at it, then at me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? About Calvin, about the other women. Would you have believed me? She looked away. No, probably not. That's why. He'd already convinced you I was a problem. Anything I said would have pushed you closer to him. So you just waited, let me walk into danger. I documented everything, made sure that when he made his move, there'd be evidence. Lorna, I was trying to protect you without losing you completely. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Well, you lost me anyway. Did I? I asked quietly. She didn't answer, just took the locket, opened it, and looked at the tiny photo of our mother inside. Her hands trembled. He told me you were jealous, she whispered, that you couldn't stand to see me happy, that you'd do anything to keep control of this state. I know. I believed him. Tears spilled down her face. I believed him over you, my own brother, the person who's been taking care of me my whole life. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just sat there, letting her cry, letting the years of manipulation and lies finally break open in the safety of our parents' porch. After a while, she wiped her face and asked, Victor, was it revenge? I thought about that question, really thought about it, about the humiliation at the engagement party, about Calvin's smirk, about the moment I decided to call Marcus. But the truth was more complicated than revenge. For the first time in my life, my sister didn't sound angry. She sounded lost. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, but Calvin's defense team worked fast. They painted me as obsessed, controlling, unable to let go of family assets. They suggested I'd fabricated evidence out of jealousy. They found 3 people from the engagement party willing to testify that I'd seemed unstable and aggressive that night. Never mind that Calvin had been the one mocking me in front of everyone. They spun it as me being unable to handle criticism. Marcus called me every few days with updates. They're desperate, he said, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. But the evidence is solid. The boat registration alone proves fraud. And now that we reopened the investigation into Patricia's death, we're finding inconsistencies in Calvin's original statement. What kind of inconsistencies? He claimed she'd been drinking heavily that day, but the autopsy showed minimal alcohol in her system. He said they were alone on the boat, but marina cameras show another person boarding with them, someone who never came forward as a witness. My blood went cold. He had help. Possibly. We're looking into it. Victor, this case is bigger than we thought. Calvin's not just a con artist. He's part of something organized. I hung up feeling sick. Because if Marcus was right, that meant Calvin had connections, resources, people who'd helped him cover up crime for years. People who might come after anyone who threatened to expose the operation. People who might come after Lorna. Or me. That night, I installed new locks on all the doors. Activated the state's old security system that hadn't been used in years. Slept with my father's hunting rifle beside the bed. Something I'd never done in my life. Lorna was living in the guest house now, the small cottage our parents had built for visitors. She kept to herself mostly, only coming to the main house for meals. We didn't talk much. She was processing trauma. I was processing exhaustion. We existed in parallel silence. 2 people learning how to be family again after years of manufactured distance. Then, 3 weeks before trial, someone tried to break into the estate. It was 2 a.m. Motion sensors triggered, flooding the driveway with light. I grabbed a rifle and moved the window. A dark sedan sat at the edge of the property, engine running. 2 figures near the gate, one working on the lock. I called 911, then Marcus. Police arrived within 8 minutes. County sheriff, 3 cars, lights blazing. The sedan peeled away before they got close, but one of the figures at the gate wasn't fast enough. Officers caught him trying to run through the woods. By morning, I knew his name, Derek Foster, former private investigator, currently employed by Calvin's defense team. They were trying to intimidate you, Marcus explained over coffee in my kitchen, or plant evidence, or both. Foster's not talking, but his connection to Calvin's lawyers is documented. This is witness intimidation at minimum. Will it affect the trial? It'll help us. Shows consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't send thugs to break into witnesses' homes. Marcus looked exhausted. But, Victor, you need to be careful. These people play for keeps. Lorna appeared in the doorway, pale. Someone tried to break in? Last night, I said gently. Police caught him. You're safe. Am I? Her voice shook. Victor, what if they come back? What if they won't. Security's upgraded. Police are monitoring. And Marcus's team knows his property is under threat. But she didn't look convinced. Neither was I, honestly. The incident made headlines. Witness in Ross fraud case target a break-in attempt. Calvin's lawyers scrambled to distance themselves from Foster, claiming he'd acted independently. But the damage was done. Public sympathy, which had been divided, swung decisively against Calvin. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. 2 days before trial, Lorna knocked on my study door. Victor, can we talk? She looked different, steadier somehow. She'd been seeing a therapist, slowly rebuilding herself from the wreckage Calvin had left. Of course. She sat across from my desk, hands folded. I'm testifying. At the trial. Lorna, you don't have to. Yes, I do. The prosecutor asked me about the life insurance policy, the joint accounts, the power of attorney documents. I signed all of them. I'm part of the evidence. She met my eyes. And I need to do this. Need to face what I let happen. You didn't let anything happen. He manipulated you. I let myself be manipulated. There's a difference. Her voice was firm. I chose to believe him over you. Chose to ignore every warning sign because it felt good to be wanted. I own that. I studied her, seeing something I hadn't seen in years. Accountability. Okay, I said finally. Then we do this together. The trial started on a Tuesday. The courthouse was packed. Media, curious locals, victims' families. I sat in the gallery with Lorna beside me, watching Calvin be led in wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of expensive suits. He looked diminished, smaller somehow, without his charm, without his control. When his eyes found mine across the courtroom, there was no smirk, just hatred, pure and cold. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Evidence of fraud, hidden assets, shell companies, the boat he'd lied about selling. Then they brought in Patricia's family, who testified about how Calvin had isolated her, controlled her finances, changed her will. Margaret's children testified about the same pattern. Then it was Lorna's turn. She walked to the stand calmly, was sworn in, and when the prosecutor asked her to identify the defendant, she looked directly at Calvin. That's Calvin Ross, the man who told me my brother was trying to steal from me, the man who convinced me to sign over power of attorney, open joint accounts, and name him beneficiary on a life insurance policy I didn't know I needed. Her voice never wavered. Did you love him? The prosecutor asked. I thought I did, but what I loved was the idea of being chosen, of being protected. He knew that, and he used it. Calvin's lawyer tried to paint her as vengeful, scorned, manipulated by me, but Lorna held her ground. My brother didn't manipulate me. He saved my life. I just wish I'd listened sooner. When she stepped down, I saw tears on her face. But she was smiling too, small, real, free. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Patricia's family wept. Margaret's children embraced. Lorna grabbed my hand and squeezed so tight I lost circulation. And Calvin? He just stared straight ahead, empty. Marcus found me outside afterward. State's opening murder investigations in both previous deaths. What you started tonight, it's going to bring justice for a lot of people. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. From across the parking lot, I watched them load Calvin into a transport van. He looked back once, found me in the crowd, and for a second, our eyes met. Then he was gone. If you believe in quiet justice, when karma comes softly but hits hard, drop a fire emoji in the comments and let us know you're watching. Lorna didn't come home right away after the trial. She texted me around midnight. Need some air. Don't worry. I'm okay. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the porch with coffee, watching the property my parents had loved, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Justice had been served. Calvin would spend years in prison. Maybe the rest of his life once the murder investigations concluded. Lorna was safe. So why'd I still feel hollow? Maybe because winning didn't erase the damage. Didn't give back the months Lorna had lost to Calvin's manipulation. Didn't undo the humiliation at that engagement party or the years of distance between us. Victory wasn't clean. It was just over. Lorna's car pulled up around 3 a.m. She got out slowly, walked to the porch, and sat beside me without a word. We stayed like that until dawn. Two people who'd survived something neither of us had expected. Finally, she spoke. I went to the apartment, the one Calvin and I were supposed to share. Lorna, it's okay. I needed to see it empty. Needed to remember it was never really mine. She looked at me, exhausted. He had it all planned out. 6 months after the wedding, he was going to suggest I sell the estate. Said it would be easier, cleaner, that we could travel, start fresh. Start fresh with your money. Yeah, she laughed bitterly. And I would have done it. Would have signed everything over and never questioned why. I didn't say what I was thinking, that she was lucky to be alive. She already knew. The prosecutor told me something today, she continued, about Patricia, the woman who drowned. She'd started asking questions a week before she died. About Calvin's first wife, Margaret. Found some old articles online and confronted him. And then she drowned. Accidentally. Conveniently. Lorna's hands shook. Victor, if you hadn't stopped him, if I'd started asking questions, don't. My voice was firm. Don't go down that road. You're here. You're alive. That's what matters. She nodded but didn't look convinced. Trauma had a way of living in the questions you couldn't answer, in the alternate timelines where things went differently. We sat in silence for a while longer. Then she said, I need to apologize. You don't? Yes, I do. She turned to face me fully. At that engagement party, when Calvin humiliated you, I didn't defend you. I stood there and let him make you look small in front of everyone. I chose him over you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Victor. The words hit deeper than I expected, because I'd told myself it didn't matter, that I'd gotten over it. But hearing her acknowledge it, hearing her take responsibility, it mattered. I forgive you, I said quietly. I forgave you the night it happened. How? Her voice broke. How could you forgive that? Because you're my sister. And forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what you choose to let go of. She started crying then. Really crying. The kind that came from years of holding everything together, of pretending to be okay when she wasn't. I put my arm around her and let her fall apart in the safety of our parents' porch, in the home that had survived everything. Days turned into weeks. The media moved on to other stories. Calvin's appeals were denied. The murder investigations progressed slowly, as they always did. Lorna stayed in the guest house, slowly rebuilding her life piece by piece. She got a job at a local bookstore. Nothing glamorous, just steady. Started going to therapy twice a week. Planted a garden in front of the cottage. Flowers our mother used to love. Small steps towards something resembling normal. One evening, about a month after the trial, she came to the main house for dinner. We'd fallen into a routine. Meals together, comfortable silence. The slow reconstruction of what family meant. I've been thinking, she said over pasta I'd made from Dad's old recipe. About the estate. About what Calvin said. About fairness and shares. My chest tightened. Lorna, I don't want to sell it. She met my eyes. I know Calvin tried to use that against you. Tried to make it seem like you were keeping something from me. But the truth is, you've been taking care of this place for both of us. And I never thanked you. So, thank you. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. I want to help, she continued. With the maintenance, the taxes, whatever needs doing. This is my home, too. I just forgot that for a while. You can stay as long as you want. The guest house is yours. I'd like that. She smiled, small but genuine. Maybe we can figure out how to be family again. The real kind, not the kind Calvin tried to destroy. That night, after she'd gone back to the cottage, I sat in my study with a glass of whiskey and my father's old photo albums. Pictures of Lorna and me as kids, back when things were simple, before beauty became her currency and responsibility became mine. We'd both been trapped in roles neither of us had chosen. She'd been the golden child who could never fail. I'd been the responsible one who could never rest. And somewhere along the way, we'd forgotten we were just people, flawed and trying. My phone rang. Marcus. Victor. Wanted to give you an update. Oregon police are filing murder charges against Calvin for Patricia's death. New evidence. Witness who saw him push her overboard. Guy was scared to come forward before, but the trial gave him courage. Will it stick? They think so. Between that and Margaret's case being reopened, Calvin's looking at life without parole. Maybe multiple life sentences. I closed my eyes. Good. How's your sister? I looked out the window toward the cottage, where a single light glowed. She's healing. Slowly. But healing. That's all you can ask for. Marcus paused. You did a good thing. Victor, I know it doesn't feel that way sometimes, but you saved her life. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about justice and revenge and the thin line between them. I'd told myself I'd acted to protect Lorna, to stop Calvin before he killed her. And that was true. But it was also true that watching him get arrested, watching his perfect facade crumble, watching him lose everything, it had felt good. Not noble, not pure, just satisfying in a way that made me uncomfortable. Was it revenge? The question Lorna had asked kept circling back. Maybe it was both. Protection and revenge, justice and satisfaction, love and anger all tangled together in a way I'd never be able to fully separate. The next morning, Lorna knocked on my door early. Victor? You awake? Yeah. Come in. She stood in the doorway, morning light behind her. I've been thinking about what I asked you after the arrest, about whether it was revenge. Lorna, let me finish. She stepped inside, sat on the edge of my desk. I needed to know if he did it for me or because of what he did to you, and I realized it doesn't matter. Either way, you stopped him. Either way, I'm alive. It was both, I admitted. I wanted to protect you, but I also wanted him to pay for humiliating me, for making me feel small. That's honest. She smiled faintly. I can work with honest. For the first time since the engagement party, I felt something loosen in my chest, like forgiveness, but directed inward. For the first time in my life, my sister didn't sound angry. She sounded lost. But now she sounded found. 3 months after the trial, autumn came to Willow Bend. The estate transformed the way it did every year. Leaves turning gold and red, air crisp with the promise of winter, the garden preparing for sleep. Lorna and I worked together raking leaves, trimming back overgrown branches, preparing the property for the cold months ahead. It was during one of these afternoons that she said, I sold the engagement ring. I looked up from the flower bed I was weeding. You kept it? Police returned it after the trial. Evidence they didn't need anymore. She pulled her jacket tighter. Got $3,000 for it. Blood money, I guess. But I donated it to a domestic violence shelter. Seemed appropriate. I smiled. Mom would have liked that. Would she? Lorna's voice went soft. Would she have liked any of this? Her daughter almost getting killed by a con artist? Her son having to save her? She would have liked that you survived. That we're here, together, fixing what got broken. Lorna nodded slowly, but I could see the weight she carried. The shame of having been fooled, the guilt of having chosen Calvin over family, the grief for the person she used to be. You know what the therapist told me? She said. That trauma changes you. You don't go back to who you were before. You just become someone new. Are you okay with that? Being someone new? She thought about it. I'm learning to be. The old Lorna thought beauty was enough. Thought being chosen meant being loved. This version knows better. We worked in comfortable silence after that, the kind that didn't need filling. This was healing, not dramatic, not sudden, just steady. 2 people learning how to exist in the same space without hurt. That evening, Lorna cooked dinner for the first time since moving in. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and vegetables, but it felt significant. We ate on the porch as the sun set, talking about small things. The bookstore job she was enjoying, a garden project she wanted to start in spring, whether we should repaint the guest house. Normal things. Safe things. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. Message from Marcus. Calvin sentenced today. Life without parole for Patricia's murder. Oregon court. Thought you should know. I showed Lorna the message. She read it twice, then set the phone down carefully. How do you feel? I asked. I don't know. Empty, maybe? Like I should feel something bigger, but I'm just tired. That's okay. You don't owe him your emotions anymore. What about you? How do you feel? I consider the question. When I'd imagined this moment, Calvin finally facing justice for murder, I thought I'd feel vindicated, triumphant, but mostly I just felt relieved, like a chapter closing. I feel like we can finally move forward, I said. Lorna raised her glass. To moving forward. We clinked glasses as the last light faded from the sky. Somewhere out there, Calvin was beginning a life sentence. Here, we were beginning something else, something harder and slower but infinitely more real. The next few weeks brought small victories. Lorna got promoted to assistant manager at the bookstore. I finally finished repairs on the estate's east fence. We hosted Thanksgiving dinner, just the two of us, but it felt full anyway. During dinner, Lorna said, I've been thinking about dating again. Eventually. Not now, but someday. My first instinct was protective panic, but I pushed it down. What does your therapist say? That I need to trust my instincts again. Learn to see red flags early. Know my worth beyond who wants me. She smiled ruefully. Basically, become a completely different person around men. Not completely different, just more careful. Were you ever careful? With relationships? I thought about my own romantic history. Sparse, cautious, always holding something back. Maybe too careful. I never let anyone close enough to hurt me. You let everyone close. We're both extremes. What's the middle ground look like? I guess we'll both have to figure that out. That night, alone in my study, I pulled out the folder that started everything. Tommy's investigation. The photos of Calvin's previous wives. The bank statements showing systematic theft. I kept it all, even after giving copies to prosecutors. I didn't need it anymore. The case was closed. Justice was served. But I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. This folder represented the moment I decided to fight back, to protect what mattered even when it cost me. Instead, I locked it in the safe, not as evidence, but as a reminder that quiet people could be powerful. That patience could be a weapon. That love sometimes meant doing hard things that nobody would thank you for. A week before Christmas, Lorna appeared at my door with something in her hands. The gold locket. I want you to have this, she said. Lorna, that's Mom's. I know, and she wants you to keep it safe. You've been the keeper of everything that matters in this family. The estate, the memories, me. Her eyes filled. I'm not ready to be trusted with this yet. But someday, when I am, you can give it back. I took the locket, felt its familiar weight. Inside was our mother's photo, young and smiling, frozen in a moment before any of this happened. You're stronger than you think, I told Lorna. I'm learning to be, because of you. That Christmas was quiet. We decorated the main house together, hung lights on the porch, played our mother's favorite carols. It wasn't a holiday either of us had imagined, but it was honest, real, ours. On Christmas morning, Lorna gave me a present, a framed photo I'd never seen before. Our parents, young, standing in front of the estate when they first bought it. Behind them, you could barely make out two small figures. Lorna and me, maybe 5 and 10 years old, already occupying the space we'd spent our lives trying to protect. Found it in the attic, she explained. Thought you should have it. I hung it in my study, next to my father's desk. A reminder of where we came from, where we'd returned to, again and again, no matter how far we wandered. That night, sitting on the porch with hot chocolate and wrapped in blankets against the cold, Lorna asked the question again, the one I'd never fully answered. Victor, was it revenge? I looked at my sister, not the golden child of our youth, not the broken woman from months ago, but this new person still taking shape. Someone who asked hard questions and waited for real answers. It was protection, I said finally, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like justice. Lorna smiled faintly. Quiet justice. Yeah, the kind that doesn't shout. The kind that waits. And when it speaks, I continued, it changes everything. We sat in comfortable silence, watching snow begin to fall on the property our parents built, the home we'd almost lost, the family we were learning to become. Consequences. That's what men like Calvin couldn't handle. He'd spent years believing charm and confidence could erase any crime, that moving fast enough meant never facing what you'd done. But consequences don't forget. They just wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, they rewrite everything. Spring came slow to Willowbend, the same way it always did. Lorna's garden began to bloom again, roses and lilacs like our mother's. Each morning before work, she dug her hands into the soil, rebuilding herself, one flower at a time. 6 months after the trial, our lives had found a rhythm. Not what we'd planned, but something honest, steady. Calvin was serving life in maximum security. The world had moved on, but the families of Patricia and Margaret hadn't. They called, they wrote, thanking me. I never knew what to say. How do you answer gratitude for stopping a monster too late? One April afternoon, Lorna looked up from the garden and said, I got asked out. I almost dropped my shovel. Who? Tom, from the bookstore. He's nice. She looked afraid, not giddy. I told her fear was smart. It meant she was paying attention. She went on that date. Came back 2 hours later glowing. He's boring. Wonderfully, incredibly boring. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a peace in her smile. Tom showed up, treated her with respect, left when she needed space. No games, just steady kindness. Marcus came by one weekend. She's different, he said. She is. We both are. He nodded toward the quiet estate. If you hadn't exposed Calvin, she'd probably be dead. I know. Some truths never got lighter. That evening, Lorna came to the porch, the place where we talked about everything. Tom asked about Calvin. I told him the basics. He didn't run. That's a good sign. She hugged her knees, voice trembling. You didn't just save my life. You saved my ability to have one. I had no words. The weight of what almost happened was too big for language. A year later, she married Tom under the oak tree in the garden. Small, simple, real. I walked her down the stone path. You sure? I whispered. Terrified, she said. But the good kind. At the reception, she raised a glass. Most people get married once and hope it works out. I almost married the wrong man, and my brother saved my life. Family is an obligation. It's showing up when it's hardest. Loving enough to be the villain in someone's story, if that's what keeps them alive. People clapped. I just stood there, overwhelmed. She was right. I'd been willing to be the bad guy if it meant keeping her breathing. When the guests left, I stood in that same garden, surrounded by flowers that had survived winter. The phone buzzed. Marcus again. Oregon prosecutors got conviction on Margaret's case, too. Calvin's never getting out. I stare at the message, thinking about all the women whose stories ended too soon, and how this one didn't. Calvin had thought the loudest man always won. He never saw me building his cage in silence. Years passed. Lorna and Tom moved nearby. Boring, beautiful lives. One Sunday, she said, I'm thinking of writing a book about what happened. Not a victim story, a survival one. Terrifying, I said. Exactly, she smiled. Maybe it helps someone else. Her book, Quiet Justice, a sister story of manipulation, family, and survival, came out a year later. It did well enough. She spoke at survivor groups, sharing what she'd learned. Always, she mentioned me, not as a hero, but as someone who'd done what was necessary when comfort would have killed. At one talk, someone asked, what would you say to your brother now? She smiled at the back of the room where I sat today. I'd say thank you for not giving up when giving up was easier. 5 years after the trial, a detective called. Mr. Ames? Calvin Ross died last night. Heart attack in his cell. Your evidence solved 3 more cases, 3 more women. After she hung up, I sat in the garden, letting it sink in. Calvin was gone. The women he'd killed weren't coming back, but others had been saved. That wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. When Lorna arrived that evening, I told her. "How do I feel about this?" she asked quietly. "However you need to." "I think relieved." "That's honest." We sat on the porch again, the sunset wrapping the estate in gold. "Do you ever regret how you handled it?" she asked. No. If I confronted him, he'd have twisted everything. The only way to stop him was quietly, thoroughly. She nodded. "You taught me real power doesn't announce itself. It just acts." The stars came out, same as when we were kids. For so long, everyone believed the loudest person was the strongest. Calvin did too. But strength isn't about volume. It's patience, evidence, truth speaking when lies collapse. They were wrong. It's the quiet ones who write the final chapter. And ours ends with survival. With a sister alive, a brother unbroken, and a monster silenced. Calvin wanted to humiliate me at that engagement party, make me small and powerless. He did, for one night, but I won forever. Would you have done the same? Made the hard choice to save someone who didn't want saving? Share your thoughts below. If you believe in quiet justice, in protecting family even when it costs you, subscribe. Because loud doesn't mean strong, and quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is wait, gather truth, and let consequences speak. That's not revenge. That's protection. But yes, it feels like justice. Hit like if you understand the difference. Drop a comment about a time you had to make a hard choice to protect someone you loved. And remember, the quiet ones always write the final chapter.